Hi guys, welcome to today's live book launch and training. I am your host, Greg ROLLETT, and throughout today, we're bringing in some of the top authors, best-selling authors, and authors who are releasing new books to teach you the things that they wrote about so that you can live a more successful life. And the great part about this entire training today is that this is 100% live, which means that you get to interact, you get to ask questions, you get to be a part of this and kind of go beyond the book and, really work with these authors so that you can learn the principles that they've learned and that they're sharing in their books. And our first author today is someone that I am very privileged to know and get to work with and have learned a lot about what she's doing and how she is helping people. And she's going to do that here for you today. She's from New Orleans, Louisiana, and she is the co-author of the brand new best-selling book, Success Mastery, that she co-authored with the legendary Jack Canfield of Chicken Soup for the Soul fame. She is a mythologist, which we're going to learn more about here, a humanitarian, and yes, she is a best-selling author. So please welcome to the stage my good friend Nina M. Kelly. How are you doing?
Good morning, thank you.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you very
We're
much.
really excited you're here. New book just came out. That's got to be exciting, right?
It's very exciting. It's really exciting. Yes.
What was it kind of like now contributing to this book, being a part of this, and it already hit the bestseller list? That's pretty cool.
It's very, I have to tell you, I must thank Jack right off the bat because he teaches that we have to take 100% responsibility for ourselves.
Yeah.
And when I started to write this article, all I kept thinking was, it's important that we share our stories. I mean, we have to be responsible to put our stories out there to help everyone else. So I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, and we're going to be talking a lot about your story today and how others can embrace and use their stories to empower themselves. I want to talk a little bit about kind of you and your background before we get started. A mythologist. What in the world is a mythologist? What do you do?
Well, a mythologist is someone who studies all the different cultures and people's philosophies and religions and the rituals. And the reason why I like mythology so much is it's my philosophy. If you understand where a person comes from, you don't try to change them.
Yeah.
You accept them. And it helps you just to relate better to people.
Yeah,
So
I think that's really powerful. And that gets into the humanitarian side.
Yeah.
Now it gives back, and you're kind of starting a new chapter, if you will, where you're going out and you're really trying to now help people, empower people, teach and train. Talk to me about some of the things you have going on.
Right now, I'm very... I have to give you the backstory.
Yeah.
Okay, the backstory is I've worked with people with death and dying and with their stories and healing. And now my new energy is to help people to understand that their stories are part of their healing process and to help them discover what their stories are and to take full ownership of that. So I'm very excited about this.
Yeah, and I love this concept of stories are part of the healing process.
Yes.
And you know this firsthand from your own story, and then hearing the stories of those who are in that hospice situation or on their deathbed, whatever it is, now hearing their side of it. And in this chapter in Success Mastery, you really start off by talking about the story of your mother and kind of your mom's own impact on you. So why don't you kind of walk us through this story in this chapter of your life?
My mother, I owe my life to my mother. And I lost my mother when I was 7 years old. But she gave me my foundation. She gave me my code of ethics, my integrity, and it all came through stories. And she taught me through telling stories about other people and the importance of community and the importance of how we need to offer ourselves back into the community, because we really are one and as a whole. So that's probably how it started. And I think what happened was when she died, which was unexpectedly, I realized I had to grab onto something, and what I held on to were all the stories that she shared with me.
Now, this is, you were very young when this happened.
I was 7.
So can we be impacted that much by the time we're 7, through someone like a parent?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's interesting because I think as a child, you hold on to the imaginations of all the, when someone's telling you your stories, you're creating your own imaginative venues, so to say.
Yeah.
And then what happened with her was I started realizing I needed to hold on to those stories and also learn from those stories.
Right.
And then I created my own story without even realizing it. It took me until I was an adult to realize that oh no, she was right. We're all one. I mean, we all have to help each other.
Mom was right.
Imagine that.
Silly mom, you know what she's talking about, and then you have that one moment where it all comes full circle.
And then as a child, and especially if you lose a parent, then you resonate with everything they say. because
Yeah.
you have to hold on to something. You know, it is your foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, throughout your life, and so it started with listening to your mom, then it
Yes.
started to listening with some of the patients and clients that you
Yes.
started working with.
Yes.
You say that obviously in order to do all this, you have to be a good listener, right? Because if you have all these great people telling you all these great stories, they're going in one ear and out the other, there's no impact. But it's this act of listening that's so powerful. So talk to me about listening.
Well, I've been very honored to work with people that are dying and be with them at the moment of their death. And it brought home that their story needed to be told. And so you really are you become one with them in the sense of, when I'm trying to pull back what you're saying about the listening.
Yeah.
Because you want to hear what they have to say.
Yeah.
Because if you listen to them, it's amazing the radiance that comes from them, even at their last moment. It's remarkable. I mean, there's such a vibrancy of life.
Yeah. Well, you say that you can actually hear the heart speak.
You can hear the heart speak. And I think what happens, and this goes back to listening, it's been my experience that when you listen to someone, truly listen without any judgments, the heart starts speaking. And the heart tells its own story. And that comes through the individual.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really powerful. We're going to talk about how the heart talks in just a second. I want to stay on listening just for 1 second, because I feel you were with these people at such incredible moments in their life, let's call it. What do you think made you a good listener? Was it just being present in the moment? Was it just that, I mean, that was your job, you know, part of it was to listen, but I feel like a lot of people just aren't present. They're not listening. They're trying to get through the conversation really fast to get to the next one.
I think it's because I like people.
Yeah.
And I want to know their story. And I have to give my mother credit again, because my mother would tell so many stories about, you learn fairy tales, but she told stories about what was happening in life at the moment. And it made me very inquisitive. And so I think in working with these people, I was so curious about where did they come from? What brought that back? And why haven't they told their story?
Right.
And why at the moment of death, it's so imperative to tell your story.
Yeah.
I became, you just engage. I became fascinated with these people.
Right.
Yeah.
And what did you learn from that, or how did you use that? What were some of the lessons that you took from these folks?
I learned that life and death are very closely connected, and that the only difference to me between life and death is a breath.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
So when we are listening, we hear the heart speak. You can actually hear the heart talk. And you'd say you can actually hear the heart talk through voice, right? Through storytelling, but it could also be through song, through music, through art, through dance, through all of these creative expressions.
Yes.
How does that work?
In ancient traditional and native cultures, so often that's exactly how they express themselves, because sometimes the story in the heart is so painful that you can't find the words.
Yeah.
So you find the movement, you find the music, you find whatever the dance is, and that's how the heart expresses itself. It brings that story to life. It brings that expression to life.
And I love that, because, I mean, you see it, you hear it on the radio, and you're like, I can hear the pain they went through during that breakup. Or, you see an amazing dance performance or a play, and you just see the passion pour out of them. Do you have any great stories or examples of someone expressing their heart through these creative means?
I have a personal story.
I'd love to hear it.
Okay. I went to a performance to hear a pianist, Martha Argerich. Her music moved me so much that at intermission, I had to get a notepad. And of course, the concert hall is dark, but I wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. I think she was such one with her music. She was one with that piano, that although she never spoke a word, her heart came through her music. And for me personally, it was amazing. I had to write it down.
Yeah.
It was profound.
Yeah, and you can see that, and we're going to talk more about creating your own story, crafting your own story as we kind of go through. But sometimes it's not just, hey, let me tell you my story. Sometimes you have to express it in these other ways, right?
Yes, and I'll go back to listening, because that I was listening, you see, and her heart was speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really, really powerful.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit earlier about some of the things that you learned from the dying, about life. You said that the only difference between life and death is a breath.
Yes.
Right? What were some other lessons that you, or maybe not even lessons, but just things that you heard from them that made you go, wow, we need to tell the story?
There were several things. Number one, I think is the most important for me, is the resilience of the human spirit. And no matter what juncture we are in the process, we're resilient. And we're resilient because we have to tell what's inside of us. You see, it wants to live. That's number one. Number two, I think that it's been my experience that at the time when someone was just about to die, there was such a life that came over them, the life in their eyes, because someone was listening and someone cared enough to hear. There was something they felt that they needed to share. And I see so many eyes now. I see so many eyes that even as weak as the body was, their eyes were vibrant.
Right.
And there was such a life there. And there was such a joy, like I can tell what's in me. And I thought that was profound.
Had they never shared these stories before, or they were just tucked in, or just they didn't have anyone that would listen to them?
Yes, I think that's the key. We're very busy in our life. We're busy we're rearing our children, we're being professionals, we're being adults, we're being parents, et cetera.
Everything.
We're everything.
Yeah.
You know? But there comes a time in life that you go, what's really important? And life is what's really important. See, the moments, those special moments.
And what kind of stories were they sharing? Just stories about their life? Were they sharing about experiences, the people that they were with? I mean, what were some of the commonalities between the stories?
Well, I go back to the heart. There were so many stories of individuals saying, I didn't tell someone goodbye. I didn't tell someone I loved them. I didn't even tell how proud I was of, my child or my parent. Or there were these stories of, I want to express this. And there were also the stories of, what did I learn that I can also share with the world? I thought that was very interesting, because even at the moment of time someone wanted to die, they wanted to give back to the world.
Yeah.
It's
it's one of those, like, what's the meaning of life? Well, I mean, to me, as a parent of two young boys, we were talking before we went live, like, to me, that is the meaning of life. How can I help them? How can I give back by doing things like this? Like you writing in a book, writing a best-selling book, getting that message to people. That's kind of your way of expressing yourself, and you're not waiting until the last breath in order to do it. Unfortunately, all these folks waited.
Yes. But you see, I call that a left-handed gift. See, when my mother died, it's not one of those gifts you want.
Right.
But it's one of those gifts that are given to you, so you appreciate moments. And that's been my gift. And it's not one I'd sign up for, but it teaches you. It teaches you, like, and I think that's what matter of fact, I know, in being with these people, that they went, I've got to give something. There's still more I want to give.
Yeah.
That's beauty.
And then that also goes back to the resilience you talked about earlier. I'm not ready to give up yet, because I have to give. I have to give back. I have to contribute to the world. Yes. So we talked about this side of kind of these folks towards the end of their life. The exciting part is the folks at the beginning of their life.
Yes.
The power of a child's imagination. This is something that you wrote about in the chapter you've been writing about for a while.
Yeah.
Why are we talking about a child's imagination here today?
Well, children are free. And they come into this world with this huge lens.
Yeah.
And they're so creative. So my passion is when you have children that maybe have health problems, to help them to create through their own imagination, create their own stories, and for them to heal themselves, to be part of the process of healing.
Yeah.
There are many, in New Orleans we say it takes many ingredients to make a good gumbo. Well, that's the same thing with healing. It takes many ingredients to make a great gumbo, and is same with healing, is that the imagination of a child. I mean, they can create their own selves as, I'm healthy and I'm strong and I'm vibrant. And that just helps with all the other modalities that they use in the healing process.
Yeah. So what can we learn from them to apply into our own healing process? How do we get back into that child's imagination? Because I got responsibilities, I got stress, I got bills, I got work. I can't just set up an imaginary world and play Legos today.
Why not?
I love that. I love that response. But, you know.
No, of course,
Yeah.
I totally understand.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to remember that take a deep breath and breathe in life. You know, take a deep breath and see where the vibrancy is for you. Mm-hmm. And bring your story, like what gives me passion? What gives me life? Because you're right, you have a wife and children and business responsibilities, but that doesn't mean that you can't dance through life.
Right.
That you can't sing through life. Because it sure makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, I think it's really powerful to kind of take that step back, right? And I think that's the hardest thing for people to do. It's the hardest thing for all of us to do.
Yes.
You had to take a day, 2 days out of your schedule to be here today. You had to take a step back to be here to share. And I think a lot of people say, well, no, I don't have 30 minutes to sit back and think about what gives me life, what makes me feel alive. And if you never take that time to think about those things, you're going to be like one of your patients who's on their deathbed saying, I never expressed that. I never shared that. I never taught that.
Yes, and there was not one patient who didn't say that. So that's a huge lesson for all of us. I mean, if on your deathbed you're going, oh, I need to do da 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 da.
Yeah. Why can't you wake up and do that on a Tuesday?
Right. Say, okay, I'm alive today, and I'll give it the best I can. Yes.
Yeah. You also talk about this thing called the power story. Mm-hmm. What's the power story?
Well, that's an individual thing.
Okay.
Okay, and there again, I'm going to go, we can't live without a heart. The heart is our vital function.
Yep.
What gives you passion? That's your power story. And if you take a moment to realize, where is the passion in my life? What gives me vibrancy? And how can I give that? I really believe in the law of physics. I believe that we're supposed to give and receive all the time. And once you sit with yourself and you realize that, it's very easy to give back into the world. And it's energizing.
So let's talk about this in the context of your career, your own life a little bit.
Yes.
How did you discover kind of your passion? What gives you that vibrancy? What gets you alive?
I think I'm a fiery little redhead.
So that helps. You were born with a little bit of it, right?
I think that kind of helps a little bit.
You have a little advantage there, but
I don't know what to say.
But I think most people don't wake up in the morning passionate about a lot of things, right? They're passionate about their fantasy football team, but that doesn't, give them purpose in life, per se.
Yes, but see, that goes back to the full circle of what's your story? Because we all have a story. Mm-hmm. We have a story that keeps us motivated, and maybe we don't take the time to discover that story. So, and go ahead.
Yeah, so how did you find yours?
I think I found my story working with the dying patients, to be honest with you.
But it wasn't before you started working with them. It was while working with them. You sort of uncovered it, right?
I uncovered it, yes. It's a journey.
Yeah. I think a lot of people want to say, all right, well, let me go on Saturday morning to the coffee shop and I'm going to spend 2 hours and find my passion.
Probably not.
Right. Like you were in there, you were working, and I'm sure there were things that you liked about that job, that you hated about that job, and through the work, you uncovered this passion. Is that true?
Yes, that is accurate. Because the more I worked with patients, the longer I became aware of the resilience of the patients, the desire to tell their story, the desire to live. I mean, we need to live until we're not here.
Right.
And many of us are like...
And it's because they don't know their story.
They don't know their story.
They haven't found their passion. They're going through just on that hamster wheel, let's call it.
Yes.
And they're not finding the light in what they do.
That's correct, yes. When I worked with the transplant patients, that was very interesting because they needed a transplant to live. Mm-hmm. So on this side of the hall, there's the patient that has just died and given the gift of life. Now, when you think about that, someone has just given them life, and you tell that story to the person who's receiving, that puts a whole different cog in the wheel. And then I think that's the beginning of self-discovery on that particular genre, so to say. Yeah.
Great. So as you're listening, as you're playing along today, what I'd love for you to do, and if you want to leave this in the comments or send in a question for 9 as we go, is what gives you vibrancy? And you can change that to what makes you happy, what makes you smile, what gives you life. So where you're not just sludging through the day, but what would you wake up and say, I want to do this today? And make a list of a few of those things. If you want to share those with us in the comments, we'll read a few of them when we do the Q&A in just a few minutes. And if you have questions about any of this, make sure you send them in. So what gives you passion? Where is the passion? What gives you vibrancy? If you can start to discover that, that's going to keep you motivated. Because I'm sure there's, the problem with what you were doing is that these weren't patients that you were going to have for the next 10 years.
That's correct.
So you had to have this passion to stay motivated because you were losing your patients.
Yes, all of them.
Unfortunately, none of us get out of here, on the winning side.
No, but it's I think what gave me passion during the time was to see what they wanted to share.
Yeah. And see them light up, see their
to see
hearts
them
beat.
light up,
Yeah.
to see that resilience, to see that twinkle in the eye,
Yeah.
to see that they still wanted to give. It's amazing at the time when you're wounded the most and you decide to give back.
Yeah.
Think about that's profound.
That's profound.
It
and
is.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
We're going to talk, let's go deeper about stories.
Okay.
Right? Because stories is so powerful. You wrote, and I remember this when we were putting this together, you say that stories weave and reweave the web of the vast collective unconsciousness. What's that all about? That's a big statement there. Well, let's unpack that. What does that mean?
Okay, well, as a mythologist, see, I personally believe that we're all connected. Mm-hmm. Okay, this is a huge universe and many galaxies, etc. I mean, you could go on, but we're all connected. And our stories, if you start examining many cultures, you'll see that many of the similar stories are weaved throughout.
Okay.
So from my point of view is that there are stories in us that we want to share, and those stories will resonate with you. Mm-hmm. You see, if I could tell you stories of when my child was a little boy, and you could say, oh boy, let me tell you, you see.
Yeah.
And so we're telling these stories all along. But they're stories that help us. They're stories that connect us. And we're a community. Mm-hmm. I mean, we are under this big essence of we're here together to make this a better place. And the more we understand that and relate to that, the more powerful our stories become.
Right.
You see?
This is cool, and so I'm going to ask a question now because
Okay.
I want to know.
Okay.
Is this kind of how most stories, whether it's a movie, a TV show, a plot, they're generally the same.
Yeah.
Just some of the minor details change, the names and the faces change, but we do a lot of storytelling here with, you have the hero's journey, and you have some of these, us versus them, and because those are the stories that are ingrained in us. Those are the stories that we relate to. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's interesting. The whole time you were speaking, I kept thinking of a spider's web, and that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It's like the spider, and you're weaving a web. Mm-hmm. Native Americans believe that we are weaving the web of life.
Wow.
You see, and just like the Hopis, they believe their whole mission is to pray every morning so the sun comes up for all of us.
Yeah.
So it is a web. We are weaving.
Yeah, and we're all working together towards.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's the importance of our story. Not to discount, our story is equally as important as the next person. And they're individual, but they're collective.
Right.
Yes.
Do you think that people are scared to tell their story? Or do they not know their story?
I think it's both. I think somehow or another we've been taught that maybe our story is not important.
Or it's not worthy. It's not,
Yes.
well, I'm not XYZ,
Yeah.
so who cares about my story?
Yes, and that's not true. See, that's number one. So I think there's that, resonance of, I think I'm just going to hold back. You see, that's number one. The other thing is, I think that people, I witnessed this, at the time when life is almost at the end, they can't hold their story any longer.
Right.
So think about that, the dichotomy of that, that we have all these stories in us that we just want to share.
Yeah.
And there's a freedom in that.
Oh, I imagine that as soon as they tell you those stories,
Yes.
they feel the weight of the world is off their shoulders, and they're able to
Yes. Yeah,
be
it's
at peace almost.
Got rid of that bag.
Yeah. Well, it's like, I talk about from like a productivity standpoint when I teach like productivity. As soon as you get that hard task off your plate the first thing in the morning, you're like, all right, cool, now I can get on with my day, right?
Right.
That client that you've been meaning to call that is going to be an uncomfortable conversation. Well,
Yes.
same thing with telling the story. You're like, I had this in me. And at this point, it might have been 60 years, 70 years,
Yes.
80 years that they've had this story that they wanted to share.
Yeah.
That's a lot of weight.
Yes. And let me tell you, life's You can live to 100. It's really quick.
It's really quick. You blink, and you're like, wow, how did I get here?
Yeah. And think about everything you've collected along the way, you know? And you've collected a lot.
You have.
You've collected your stories, you've collected other people's stories, and you've collected the experiences of your environment,
Yeah.
of your community, of your culture.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's really powerful, and we have to tell those. You say that stories allow the inexperienced listener to create interpretations according to his or her field of expertise, right? And their experience, because I can only tell my stories.
Right.
Right, and from my viewpoint, from my point of view, and that's all I can share. That's all I know, right?
Yes. What happens, and that's the listener, the giver.
Right.
Okay. What I'm hearing, you're going to tell me your story, but I'm going to hear it in my landscape, in my environment, even though you're telling it in yours.
Right.
And that's how you relate, because there's something that's going to connect. There's something that you're going to say, and I'm going to relate it to some part of my essence.
Yeah.
And then it's a gift. You've just given me a gift. Like, oh, that's right. Let me see it from this perspective. But it's still mine.
Yeah.
You know, that's the deal.
And we're in an interesting time now where people are hearing other people's stories, but they're discounting them, they're discrediting them, they're not seeing it from their point of view because I've already made judgments and opinions, and we're seeing it in the political landscape, the cultural landscape.
Yes.
So this could be used as a force for good or for evil, if you will. So how do we? Maybe let's talk about how do we become a better listener so that we can see it from the other person's experience.
I think that's called compassion. You know, and being willing to show up. See, if I'm engaging in, if you said, let's go have a cup of coffee, and I want to share something with you, just be there. It's amazing what happens.
Yeah.
Because there's an energy there that transcends all this other malarkey. you know.
Yeah.
Really. And when you show up to listen, that's when the heart starts speaking. Because the heart knows. You can't fool the heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Powerful.
Yeah.
So then why does shared unconsciousness need to become expressed? Why does it need to be a shared experience?
You know, I'm thinking about the weather these days with the hurricane. Mother Earth is very powerful. And she's telling everyone, best you listen.
Because I'm more powerful than you. So
yeah, really. So I think that this is from my perspective is that that's when you give the collective the opportunity to speak, because you are listening, because you're calming yourself down, and you're willing to show up to listen. And when you do that, that's when the collective comes in, and that's when other things transpire.
Yeah.
It's bigger than all of us.
Yeah, I love the analogy of kind of the spider web and just everything being interconnected. That makes it bigger than all of us.
Yes.
Right? Because we have this tendency. I mean, we're human beings that have to worry about our own survival, our own success, and we're not always thinking about the butterfly effect or how what I do when I'm spinning my web over here. How does that affect you over there? And when you start to have that perspective, when you start listening to others, when you start having those shared experiences, you start realizing that what I'm doing here is affecting other people. What we're doing today, there's people all over the world watching this. We don't know that what web they're going to spin because of it, and that's why I love what you're doing now, giving back and sharing your story, because you don't know how that's going to impact someone or how it's going to make them feel or what change they're going to make or who they're going to go listen to today.
Yes, yes, and if you take it from a medical perspective, the story that's residing deep within us is your healing story. See, and so giving it permission to come alive, giving it permission to speak.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the $1 million question, as we start to wrap up today,
Okay.
Where do we start? Do we start as the listener, or do we start gathering our story to tell our story?
Oh, I think it's both. I mean, I think that obviously, when you're speaking, I need to listen, which and vice versa. Hopefully, But also, the whole time you're listening, you're gathering.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the native cultures again. There's the hunter and the gatherer, and as you're listening, you're taking things in, and then it also gives you permission because it gives your story the vibrancy to come alive. Your story is like, wait a minute, I have something to say too.
Yeah.
And see, the moment you give your story permission to come alive or to resound, that's the beginning of the healing process.
Yeah.
It really is.
Powerful.
Yeah.
An action step that I have for all of you who are watching right now, watching this on the replay, is to have one conversation today where either you are the listener or you're sharing that thing that you've wanted to get off your chest for so long. I think if we can start there, if they just do that one simple thing today, it's going to compound. You're going to start to see it. Because if I can listen to you and have a great perspective and we can have that shared experience, I can do it again. And I can do it again. And if I can tell you one story, well, guess what? I can tell another one. I can tell another one. But it starts with that first interaction. And then, Nina, as we begin to wrap up today, where do we go from here? So you've given us a really good background. You've given us a lot of lessons, a lot of great things I'm going to recap in a second. But where do we go from here?
You know, right now I'm so interested in the medical world and the medical and healing. So from my perspective is have someone to hear you, just like you said. Have someone to listen. And then the other thing is spend some time with yourself being compassionate and come from the heart and put no judgments on your own story. And then let that story come alive and then give it back to you so that you can embrace it to heal yourself. It's an incredible life force.
It is a very incredible life force. And as we talk about being compassionate, letting our story out, collecting these other experiences to help our story, do you practice your story? Is it just a matter of telling it over and over again? Is it like what's helped you to even get your story out, to even be here today writing books, and you have other books you know, that you put out as well? Is it just, it's always evolving?
It is evolving. I think for me, what's come to life for me, and I've said this earlier, is the resilience of the human spirit. And as I listen to other people's stories, or I look at my own life and I look at the experiences I've had in life, the spirit, the resilience of us is stronger than we know, but it's also wanting its own life.
Yeah.
See? And so when I see that, I think that, and I encourage everyone, just be free to speak, be free to explore.
Yeah.
And I've been very fortunate because I did some research with story and healing, and it was amazing what came from that, you know.
I want to talk about that for a second,
Okay.
using story with healing. For someone who's in pain, for someone who does need to heal from whatever it is, whether it's a medical thing, whether it's a stress, it's a divorce, it's a job loss, whatever the pain is that they're in. So 2 questions is A, how can they use story? And then B, can their story change? Because who they are that got them there might not necessarily be the story that they have later, right? Because the story you probably told yourself at 7 when your mom passed away is different than the story you told yourself as an adult about your mom, I'm sure, right? So our stories can change, right?
Yes. Well, remember the web. The web starts off like this, then it gets like this.
It just keeps growing, it keeps growing. Yeah.
Right. And so the story, and it's been my experience, you're right. When I was 7 years old, I'd lay in the backyard and go, well, where are you? You see, that's a whole different venue than, oh my goodness, look what she gave me.
Look at all the tools she gave me. Yeah, she empowered me, as opposed to she left me.
Right, yeah. And so you take that, for me personally, I've tried to look at every experience. Some are hiccups, you know, some I wouldn't want to go back and revisit.
Yeah.
But then there's others that I'm going are real, but they're blessings in disguise. They really are, because you're gathering, and it gives you the freedom to realize the ocean does not stay stagnant. The ocean is always moving. Well, we're very much like the ocean. We are constantly moving, and that's called life. So I think with your story, it's been, when I worked with patients, we always went back to the heart, a heart of a story that you could give yourself, something that you could receive, and you could love yourself through your own story, you see? And that's the freedom, that's the healing, that's the beginning, and it doesn't have to stay the same.
Yeah.
And I'm going to look with a different lens anyway than you will.
Right. Yeah, I love that analogy of the ocean. It's always moving, we're always moving, it's life. But if we're always moving, that means we can change directions.
Absolutely.
You know, if your life's not going in the right direction, you do need to heal. Well, guess what? Instead of going this way today, let's go this way today. You have that power, that ability, and it's all about the story you tell yourself.
That's correct. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be a story that you think anybody else accepts, because it's your story.
Yeah.
You know, I remember when I was working with the patients, every patient that I worked with, I asked them to create a story that when someone gave them something, they could accept totally, unconditionally. Every story was totally different, but it was very powerful to the patient.
Yeah.
See? And that was something they held on to, that they could resonate with.
Yeah. So someone's been watching today, they've been listening, they want to learn more about what you do, how you can help them. We've got a couple resources, ninamkelly.com. They can also reach out to you.
Yes.
How can you help them? I think that's a good question, right? So if someone's here, they need to go through that healing process, they need to learn about the power of story. How can you help them to go through this?
Before I answer that, I'd like to go back, because I think there's not
Sure.
just one way to heal someone.
Sure.
See, so let's go back to the ancient Greeks.
Yeah.
The Greeks believed if you breathed, exercised, and you had to have a spiritual side and an intellectual side.
Yeah.
If you have all that, it makes a whole.
Right.
So the same thing with healing. There are many different modalities. And my perspective, the gift that I have to offer, is working with someone, identifying a story that can help, then use story and images to create a part of the healing component, which is only part of the component.
Right.
It's not the whole, because you don't want to, modern medicine is modern medicine. But modern medicine now has come back to complementary medicine. There are many modalities to make the whole.
Right.
And that's what the Greeks thought too.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful, having that holistic view of everything, because if you don't take care of your body, if you don't eat good, you can tell yourself all these things. And the same thing is, if you have this strong mindset, it's going to help you to exercise and to breathe and to, you got to take care of yourself, both physically and mentally.
Yes. And the best gift you could give yourself is 10 deep breaths a day. It's amazing.
Yeah.
The energy that comes from that. And then allow yourself to use a visual to create your story, to give back the love to yourself and help heal yourself.
Yeah.
Isn't that over the door? Physician, heal thyself, and then know thyself, and to thy own self be true. The Greeks said that.
Powerful.
Yeah.
And it still rings true today,
Yes.
just as it did then.
Yeah.
So how can you help them to do some of this?
Well, normally what I would do is I obviously I've worked with medical patients, and I work with patients and the history in their physical, and I figure out or we identify what the medical problem is. And then in my research, I asked, why do you think you have this issue? Not what the medical people have said.
Yeah.
Not what doctors, because that's just one component. And that gives them the freedom to examine themselves, create their story. That story is a story that they bring back into their heart, that allows them the freedom, that allows them the visualization to send love, light, energy. The heart keeps everything circulating.
Yeah.
It's all one. So we work in a process of how do we incorporate all the tools, the medical component and also the other component.
Yeah. Very powerful. And if they head to ninamkelly.com, and if they just reach out to you via email, they can start that process with you and bring you in to either help them personally or work in group situations. You can come and speak to groups and do trainings. Just so many possibilities. Just depends on the individual's needs.
Right. And as far as training goes, I have a different. It's a different outline.
Yeah.
It's how do you train people to understand to use those same techniques and implement that with the patients.
Yeah.
The patients want to heal. Most patients want to heal.
Right. Most.
And
we want to help them. We want to help the ones that want to heal. Yeah.
Yes, of course. Yeah. And that goes back to the children. That's what's so beautiful about the children and their imagination.
Yeah.
They see they look for heroes. Why not become your own hero?
Man,
become your, yes. Yeah.
We got a couple minutes left. You want to take some questions from everybody who's watching?
Sure.
I think that'd be really powerful. Yeah. Right now, guys, a couple things just to recap. That power story. What gives you passion? Where is the passion? What gives you vibrancy? Answer some of those things for yourselves. If you have questions about how to do that, send them in. Nina can help you right here today. The difference between life and death is just a breath. Something to remember every day, especially as you take those 10 deep breaths. I like that. Just something simple. Do it in the morning, couple minutes, and it gets you there. And it's all about the resilience of the human spirit. We talked a lot about that today. Send in your questions. Visit ninamkelly.com. We're going to take a very short commercial break. When we come back, Nina and I are going to be over on the other side. We're going to answer your questions live. And congratulations on the book, bestseller. It's pretty cool. I like it. We'll be back in just a second with more from Ambitious Live.